know if your pelvic floor is healthy? Better yet, how do you know if it's not healthy? Or let's just start at the beginning. What is a pelvic floor and why do I even have to think about it? Welcome to Homemaking with Purpose, our bi-weekly show on everything homemaking. That includes cooking, cleaning, laundry, gardening, and the biggie, self-care. And pelvic health is all about self-care. With me today is Sarah Gamble, a doctor of physical therapy. She is a physical therapist, but she does have a doctor of physical therapy. And she works at Stepping Up Physical Therapy. And she is going to talk to us today about pelvic floor health. She's going to help us understand what our pelvic floor is, what is good pelvic health, and then what we need to do about it if it's not in good condition. So, Sarah, I am so glad you could join us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm just glad you were able to take some time out of your busy schedule to come. I tell you what, I've been having some conversations with some ladies, and some of the conversations we've had lately at the beauty shop are certainly not things I thought we would ever get into. So pelvic health, it turns out, was one of those things. So let me ask you, before we get into it, tell us just a little bit about your homemaking journey.
So I am married. I've been married to my husband for, I think, 6-7 years now. And we do have a almost 2-year-old daughter together. As far as my educational background, I have my undergrad in exercise physiology, and then I got my doctorate of physical therapy at the University of Findlay, and then I went on to get advanced training in pelvic floor through Heinemann and Wallace. So I do have advanced training in both women's pelvic health and then also pediatric or kids pelvic floor physical therapy.
Well, you can certainly see that Sarah is definitely the one that is prepared to talk to us about this topic today. And I want you guys to know I got my notes right here because I want to make sure I get this right. So on our last show, we talked about how overwhelming homemaking can be and trying to create work-life balance. And if you missed that show, I'll link it in the description box so you can check it out. But one of the strategies that we talked about was self-care. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, pelvic health is a part of self-care. So if you could just give us a good understanding of what a pelvic floor is and what is pelvic health. And when you're ready to show that little model there,
Okay.
let me know, and then I'll bring the camera in closer so that they can see what you're talking about.
Okay.
So we'll just get started with that.
I'll probably actually start with this model because it's a good visual. So.
Okay, well let me go move the camera so that they can see what you're talking about.
All right. I'm going to just kind of explain like where our pelvic floor is and kind of its general function. So I'm going to use this nice little model here. We're looking at this model, so these are kind of our hip bones here. And then if we're looking from the back, this is the bottom of our low back or our lumbar spine. And then this is going to be our sacrum. And then at the very end of that's our tailbone. And then if we flip back to the front here, this bone in front is called our pubic bone. And then at the very bottom, we have these two little bones. Most people just know them as your sitting bones, but we call them the ischiotubers. So our pelvic floor kind of spans this space here from the pubic bone to the tailbone, and it also connects to our sitting bone. So it kind of forms like a sling or a hammock here, and it's basically the bottom of our core. So a lot of times when we're thinking of the core, a lot of people think of our abdominal muscles, but our core actually consists of quite a few groups of muscles. So basically, you can think of our core being from here all the way to the bottom or down below our pelvis where our pelvic floor is. So the muscles that consist of our core include like our diaphragm at the top here, and then our six-pack muscles, or what we call our rectus abdominal muscles in the front. And then on the sides of our core we have our oblique muscles. Along the back, along our spine, we have some small muscles called our multifidus muscles. They help connect each segment of our spine together. And then at the very bottom is where our pelvic floor is. So our pelvic floor actually has a really big job as far as like supporting our body. So what our pelvic floor does is it has to support not only all of our pelvic organs, so like our bladder, our uterus, our rectum, but then it also has to support everything above it. So our intestines, our heart, our lungs, the weight of gravity pushing down on us. If you're pregnant, the weight of the baby pushing down on it. If you're carrying something heavy, the weight of that. So it has a pretty big important role. And it's also kind of interconnected with all the other core muscles. So if there's dysfunction in one muscle of our core, it can affect all the other muscles.
Okay, so that was a great explanation. Thank you so much for that. So now let me ask you, how do we know when there's something going on in the pelvic floor? Like, what are the symptoms associated with pelvic floor dysfunction?
Okay. So there can be a couple different things that can clue you into there might be something going on. Some big symptoms that we see are urinary leakage, bowel leakage, pelvic floor pain or tenderness with tampon use, with intercourse, or just kind of in general. So those are kind of some of the big main ones, as well as sometimes you can feel like there's like a heaviness or like a pressure, like something's falling out. And then that would be more consistent with a prolapse. So those are kind of the main ones that are the big things that we see that people usually complain of.
So now, like I said, we've been having some conversations in the beauty shop, and one of the things that had been coming up was leaking, a little bit of squirting when coughing or laughing, and there are so many commercials out today featuring women with incontinence pads or briefs and those kinds of things. So evidently this urinary leakage and those kind of problems are much more prevalent than one would think, unless one starts getting to a few conversations in the beauty shop.
Yeah, so actually I was reading some research a couple days ago, and I think it's like 55% of women will experience some type of leakage at some point in their life. So it is very common, but common doesn't necessarily mean normal. So we shouldn't normally have that, but it happens a lot, and a lot of times we just, as women, brush it off, oh, normal mom leakage, or, you know, things of aging, that type of thing. But actually that is a sign that your pelvic floor is having some dysfunction. So it could be, you know, a couple different things, but mainly what we see, either you're getting leakage because the muscles are tight and irritated, or if the muscles are not as strong as they should be to kind of close off the opening where the urine leaves the bladder, and then you get leakage that way.
Okay, if you're just joining us, I am Denise Jordan, your host for Homemaking with Purpose, and with us today is Sarah Gamble, a doctor of physical therapy, and she is talking to us about women's pelvic floor health. And this episode of Homemaking with Purpose is brought to you by Apron Diva, my online apron boutique. Pretty and practical, we believe that an apron can be a homemaker's best accessory. Visit us at www.aprondiva.com. So I guess my question then is, how can I improve my pelvic floor or pelvic health? And ladies, I'm saying my pelvic floor because that's what I want you to think about, is my pelvic floor, meaning your pelvic floor as well as mine. What can we do to improve our pelvic floor health?
So a couple things that you can think of are like more kind of dietary or lifestyle modifications. So thinking about the things that you eat and the things that you drink, because certain things can irritate the pelvic floor, or not necessarily the pelvic floor, but more so the bladder. Or, you know, if you're having issues with constipation, really working on that, getting that under control, that can be a big thing. That can cause some pelvic floor dysfunction. Chronic constipation is a big thing that can weaken or cause tension in the muscles.
Well, one of the things that I saw, and we were talking about this while I was getting the camera set up, was that there are some foods that cause irritation. I'll just put it that way. And let me grab my notes here. But foods to avoid that can cause bladder irritation and other areas of the pelvic floor included caffeinated beverages, so that's for all you coffee lovers out there, alcohol, highly acidic fruits and veggies such as tomatoes, cranberries, and oranges. You guys know I love cranberries. I have cranberry sauce just about every day. Like most people have corn and green beans. I have cranberry sauce. And I'm like, what? Cranberry sauce is on the bad list? carbonated beverages such as soda, spicy foods, and artificial sugars and sweeteners, and Splenda was one of those examples. So do you want to share anything about that?
So those are all things that we consider to be bladder irritants. So they can be problematic, like especially if you're doing large quantities of those on a daily or frequent basis. So I'll have a lot of people that are big pop drinkers or big coffee drinkers, and they drink what I would call excessive amounts of those drinks a day, and then they're having issues with like urgency or leakage. And that's one of the things that I recommend. You might not necessarily have to cut it out completely, but maybe think about cutting back on it. So I always tell my patients, in moderation, things are okay. But it's when we get to the point where we're consuming large quantities and then it kind of hangs around in the bladder for a little bit, and then it irritates the lining of the bladder, and then that's when you start to get like the urgency and the leakage because your bladder's trying to get those what we call bladder irritants out of there.
Now, I'm going to back up just for a second, and we were talking about exercises to improve your pelvic floor, and one of the ones that I've heard people talk about for years is Kegel exercises. So let's talk about that one.
Okay. So I do think Kegels are a great exercise for like pelvic floor strengthening, but you also kind of have to be careful in the sense based on what's going on with your pelvic floor. So if you're having a lot of pelvic pain, Kegels are probably not going to be the greatest first exercise for you to get into. So when we go to do a Kegel, that's contracting the pelvic floor muscles. So if they're already contracted and short and we ask them to contract more, it's likely going to irritate the muscles and give you like more of the symptoms that you're having. So it really depends on what is the cause of your pelvic symptoms. So if it's more what we call tightness or hypertonicity in the pelvic floor muscles, we want to avoid Kegels initially, but if it's more like a weakness issue, then Kegels are a good kind of first exercise to get into, and then gradually build on the difficulty of those Kegels.
Okay, so now let me ask you this too. So when should I start worrying about my pelvic floor? I'm a woman of a certain age, so certainly a lot of the ladies that I'm talking to in the beauty shop are having some pelvic floor issues, and we're having different forms of difficulty. But what about my young homemakers out there? What about my 20-year-old new bride or my 30-year-old having her first baby? When should they start worrying about their pelvic floor?
So I really don't think there's any like too young of an age to start, working on your pelvic health. So our pelvic floor is a muscle just like any muscle. So it's just like going to the gym. If I'm going to the gym and I want to, get my core stronger, I'm going to work on my core. So same thing with the pelvic floor. Kegels are a good way to kind of incorporate pelvic floor strengthening. But if you are having symptoms of like leakage or pelvic pain, again, you should probably see a pelvic floor specialist to determine if your muscles are tight, and you don't necessarily want to start with Kegels. But I think there's never like a too young of age to start working on that. Especially, I would recommend, if not before, like if you want to have kids, and before you get pregnant, during your pregnancy, and even after your pregnancy is a great time for that, because our pregnancy is really, really strainful on our pelvic floor. So I think the stronger we can get that, the more it's going to help not only with labor and delivery, but also like female issues that you might have following pregnancy.
Okay. So now, you said a word, female issues. Now, I just want to say, when I was a girl, and you guys can tell it was a long time ago, but when I was a girl, I used to hear my mom and her sisters talk about, so-and-so is having female problems. And I used to wonder, what are female problems? Now I'm wondering, is this it? Is this maybe what they were talking about? Like something going on here with the pelvic floor, the pelvic organs, maybe urinary incontinence and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, that's probably what they were talking about. Things like urinary leakage, prolapse, those are some big things that we see with aging. So anyone can have leakage, and I really honestly see women from their 20s all the way up to their 80s that have leakage. So I think a lot of times we just brush it off as like a normal thing as being a woman. But like I said before, just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal. So I think definitely like urinary leakage and prolapse are two of the big things that women will be like, oh, it's just kind of like normal thing that happen as you age.
So if you're just joining us, I just want to say we have with us today Sarah Gamble, Doctor of Physical Therapy, and she has really been schooling us on some of the issues associated with pelvic floor health, in particular women's pelvic floor health, what it is, and then what it looks like if there's a problems with that. So if you're just joining us, you want to go back and hit the replay so that you can get all of the goodness that she has shared with us. And again, I am Denise Jordan, your host, and this is Homemaking with Purpose. And I'm just saying, she is spilling the tea today. So I really want to thank you, Sarah, for joining us. I have just gotten so many gems out of the things that you have shared with us. So let me just ask you, if people live in the Northeast Indiana area and they want to connect with you in regards to some pelvic health issues, how can they do that?
So the best way to get a hold of me, like you said, I work at Steppin' Up, and you can link our general phone number in your show notes if you want. And we actually do have multiple clinics in the Fort Wayne area. We have a bunch of great pelvic floor therapists, so kind of depending on where you're at, just give us a call and we can get you in on our schedule and talk to one of our therapists. Okay.
So thank you for that, but let's say I don't live in Northeast Indiana. I've got people that join me from the UK, some people that join me from Australia, and then people all over the United States. What advice do you have for them if they're beginning to think they may have some pelvic health concerns? How can they get some help?
So my best advice would be just, do just a basic Google search for like pelvic floor physical therapists, and then whatever area that you live in. Obviously make sure you're looking at the reviews, just because you want someone that you know is going to be good, and just give them a call and I'm sure they'll get you in.
Okay, all right. Well, that is really great. Sarah, again, thank you so much for joining us. Now, do you have any last words?
My big thing is, if you feel like something feels off in your pelvic floor, and your friends, your family, they're just like, oh, it's just normal part of aging or pregnancy or whatever. Like I said before, common is not the same as normal, so a lot of these pelvic floor issues can be treated and can be fixed, so I definitely recommend getting in with a pelvic floor therapist, and it's likely they can help you take care of your issues.
Well, ladies, we have certainly had our education for today, and I really want you to think about how you can use this information that Sarah has shared with us. And let me invite you to sign up for my newsletter, Homemaking with Purpose. It comes out about every 6 weeks, and we have all kinds of information in there to make your homemaking journey easier. And if you hate to do laundry, if laundry is your challenge, sign up for my Laundry Lab Masterclass. And we are kicking that off with a 10-day in the Laundry Lab challenge starting on National Laundry Day, which is April 15th. So please, I'll put the links in the description box and you can sign up there. So homemakers, is your home completely blown up? It is a disaster, and you don't know where to start. And what's worse, you don't know how to get started. Or maybe you can get things cleaned up, but within a day or two, you're back where you started. Things are just a mess, and you just don't know what it is you're doing wrong. Well, homemakers, trust me, I've been there. I have lived that life, but I've made and kept a home for more than 50 years, and I've learned a few things since then. I've frequently been asked if I do individual coaching, and the answer at this time is yes. I've opened a Patreon channel so that I can provide that service for you. It is the elite tier, and it will give you one weekly session with me at $100 a month. So that'll be 4 25-minute sessions where I work individually with you to help you solve your unique problems. So I'll put the link to my Patreon channel in the description box below, and then I can help you create the warm, cozy, and clean home that you desire. So now that you know pelvic health is a thing, what are you going to do about it? I'll see you next time.